Now going to question 16, the prompt is asking us here which choice logically completes the text. And when you're being asked to complete the text, that's a predictive question asking for what comes next. But if you just summarize the text, usually one answer matches your summary. So let's try it. In a study of mechanisms underlying associative memory, the ability to learn and remember connections between inherently unrelated things, these scientists presented mice with memory tests. They discovered that fan cells, a type of cell found in a certain part of the brain, are necessary for the acquisition of new associative memories. They also found that fan cell activity requires dopamine, a chemical the brain produces in response to pleasure and rewards. Consequently, receiving a reward should likely help too. So let's follow this sequence one more time. We are seeing that fan cells are necessary for the acquisition of new associative memories. From there, the fan cell requires dopamine. So receiving a reward should help to increase the fan cells and/or the dopamine, in my own words. So let's go ahead and see which answers might match. A says, receiving a reward decreases an individual's capacity to utilize dopamine. Well, we're not really seeing anything about how the individual utilizes the dopamine. Now going to answer choice B. Receiving a reward should increase an individual's capacity to recognize differences between unrelated things. Well, that's the idea of the associative memory. And that might actually be it. That might require kind of re-examining the text and seeing if the connections are there. So let's save that one for later. Now going to C. Receiving a reward should increase an individual's capacity to form associative memories. Well, similarly, that also might be it. There seems to be sort of a flow of ideas that we need to reanalyze in order to find out if B or C might be the answer. But let's look at D for a second. Receiving a reward is likely to decrease an individual's capacity to create fan cells. It seemed like what was being said was that the reward increases the fan cells and increases the dopamine, or requires more dopamine. So I think D is kind of the opposite. So we've got it down to two answer choices. But let's go ahead and look a little deeper. So in the text, we're seeing that fan cell activity requires dopamine, and dopamine is something the brain produces in response to pleasure and rewards. So receiving the reward is going to increase the dopamine. Fan cell activity requires dopamine. So if you have more dopamine, you have more fan cells. And fan cells are right here, and they are necessary for the acquisition of new associative memories. So there's the reward, which leads to the dopamine, which leads to the fan cells, which leads to more associative memories. So receiving a reward will result in more ability to form associative memories. And that sounds exactly like answer choice C. Now let's quickly discuss why B is wrong. B says that receiving the reward is going to increase an individual's capacity to recognize differences between unrelated things. But if you look at the definition of associative memory, it's the ability to learn and remember connections between unrelated things, not differences. So that's what's wrong with B, and the answer here is C.